Thank you for joining us. It's a beautiful morning. The day before Mother's Day. Hopefully all of you mothers will have a lovely day and a lovely weekend. I want to thank you for taking the time to join us this morning. Amy Shepard, our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, is here to share some things with us and to facilitate a conversation. And we have Barry Davis as well joining us. So we hope that that the information that we provide you with today will help us lean into some conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion as it pertains to St. Anne's and also as it pertains to distance learning. I want to remind everybody before we start that next Saturday we will be having the staggered time for materials pickup at school. So this will be our last official virtual coffee of the year. However, we've gotten some really great feedback about these events. And I want you to know that it will not be our last ever virtual coffee. So we are planning more of these, but for the Saturdays for the remainder of May, this will be our last one. So again, I do want to thank you for joining me this morning, and I'm going to turn it over to Amy Shepard, and she has, hopefully you can see her slide presentation. She has some information that she's going to share in that, but as I said, this is really about a conversation. So I hope that if you're feeling comfortable, you will consider sharing your thoughts, ideas, and questions. You can do that by unmuting yourself or by dropping information into the chat box, and I will serve as moderator today.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Val. Thanks so much. I just want to reiterate what Val said. I really do hope that this can be an open conversation and not just me putting information out there. I do have a few slides that I would like to share where I'm just sharing some information with you about the first 4 slides, but then I really want to open it up so that we can all talk together. And if at any time, Val, please jump in, and Barry jump in, and we can all do this together. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share a little bit about our diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives and our mission here at St. Anne's. You might hear us refer to it as DEI for short. And DEI is woven into everything that we do here at St. Anne's. It always has been. It happened before I got here. And it's just really a part of everything that we do. It's not something separate that we do. So when I think back to about 2006, it was my second school year at St. Anne's. There was a group of parents, teachers, and board members who
that's what you just
together to draft a DEI mission statement to go along with our St. Anne's mission statement to illustrate how seriously we take this. So I would like to take a minute, if you don't mind, to just read it aloud, because sometimes it lands differently when you hear it read. So St. Anne's commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. St. Anne's is committed to nurturing a learning environment, a learning community that is free from intolerance and prejudice. We seek to witness to the splendor of God's creation and to honor the dignity of the individual human spirit by including faculty, students, administrators, staff, and trustees from diverse cultural, racial, religious, family, and economic backgrounds in our community. The rich diversities of people and the many perspectives they bring serve to enhance the quality of educational experiences at our school. At St. Anne's, we seek to create an environment in which differences are honored and celebrated. We believe that including people with diverse backgrounds, beliefs, and experiences enriches our community, makes our learning environment more intellectually stimulating, and helps children learn the crucial skill of working productively with people different from themselves. We aspire to create a community in which diversity thrives through our classroom and programs, admissions, hiring, and board recruitment practices, our student and adult diversity committees, and our academic studies. Together, we seek to foster a community that is sensitive to issues of social justice, mindful of the experiences people of diverse backgrounds have in our school, and active in its pursuit of equity and justice within our school community, as well as beyond our campus borders. And I think they did a beautiful job with this. They took months to draft this. They got a lot of feedback and input, and we really strive to live this every day at St. Anne's. So, when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, what do we really mean with those words? Often you hear people mention the word diversity, diversity, when really we're talking about equity and inclusion as well. So, I'd just like to take a moment to define what these mean for us here at St. Anne's. So, when we're talking about diversity, we're really just talking about who's in the room. So, who's here, right? So, we have different types of people from a wide range of identities with different perspectives and experiences, including race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religion, age, and there's a whole lot more to that. We know that we have difference in perspectives and learning styles. So that's diversity. Equity, does everyone have fair access to resources in our community? Right? So we remove the predictability of success or failure that currently correlates with cultural factors such as race, and we examine biases and create inclusive environments. And then when we're talking about inclusion, we're really asking, are all community members showing up as their authentic selves, able to flourish and fully embrace all that St. Anne's has to offer? So who is really all about St. Anne's? They're living it. They're not afraid to take risks. They're speaking, they're raising their hands, they're participating. That's inclusion. So to illustrate diversity in our school, we have a slide of our demographics, and these are family reported student demographics. So hopefully these are pretty inclusive, but we might be missing some things. Currently, we have 120 male students and 128 female students. Our family reported ethnicities, we are 65% white, 15% African American and Black, 11% multiracial, 9% Asian American. And the known religions observed in our community are Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, and Judaism, right? But we can't quantify in statistics all the diversity that we really have in our building. We have a vast diversity of thought, perspectives, learning styles, interests, and passions, and much more. So now we're going to move on to equity. And I like these two cartoons that we see here that illustrate equity beautifully. I'd like to pause for a minute and give you a moment to look at these pictures. I'd really like to have a short conversation about the illustration on the left, the one that says equality versus equity. And if anyone is willing to kind of share what they see in these pictures, I know what I see when I look at it. It might be different than what you see. So I'll just pause. And Val, I'm unable to see anyone from the way I'm presenting, really. So if anyone would like to jump in, you could just feel free to.
Sure. So please feel free to unmute, or you can put something in the chat box and I'll be happy to read it.
So in the top illustration, you have 3 bicycles that looks like the same size, with one child looking like he or she can't actually ride on that big bike.
Right, exactly. Does anyone else want to add?
This earlier at the middle school coffee, I shared that I see very similarly, Phil, and I see that the first picture to me is a one-size-fits-all approach where that doesn't necessarily work. And the second picture, the sizes are adjusted so that everybody gets what they need.
Right. Exactly. And that's exactly what I see. When I see it, I kind of think of a family going for a bike ride at a bike rental place, and the first bike rental place only offers the same size bike. So you see the child kind of struggling to reach the seat. It has to stand in order to pedal the bike. It looks like the second person, which might be the mom, is a woman. She seems to be riding comfortably, and the man is hunched over and not riding very comfortably. And then when I look at the bottom picture, I imagine they went to a different bike rental place, a place that offers different size bikes. And it looks like the child was able to get the size he needs, and the woman the size that she needs, and the gentleman the size that he needs. And everyone is able to ride comfortably. So I think that illustrates equality versus equity beautifully, with equality being on the top and equity being on the bottom, where everyone gets what they need. Same thing on the right. Now the illustration on the right is much more common. You may have seen this before. You see 3 people trying to watch a soccer game, and there's a support system in place that should allow people to see the soccer game, but it's not working for everyone. So 2 people can see the soccer game, but the third person cannot, even with the support system in place. In the equity box, you'll see that everyone gets the supports that they need. Okay, the first person does not have a box in this picture, the second person has 1, and the third person has 2 boxes, and everyone is able to see the soccer game. And the last slide is justice. Okay, all 3 can see the game without supports or accommodations because of the cause of the inequity was addressed. Okay, those wooden slats, that fencing was removed, and everyone is able to see the soccer game. Okay. So I'd like to talk a little bit more about equity and inclusion. And on this slide, we're going to talk about equitable and inclusive practices at St. Anne's. And this is where I would really like to invite people to unmute and to perhaps share in the conversation. So I took the liberty of just jotting down some spaces where I see equitable and inclusive practices at St. Anne's. I'm sure that I have missed some and haven't included everything, so other people can jump in and add. But I see equitable and inclusive practices in our curriculum. Our curriculum spans a wide array of topics in all subject areas and allows for these topics to be approached from multiple perspectives. Students are taught to think critically and ask thoughtful questions such as who is telling the story and whose story is being told, and perhaps who's being left out of the story, what is not included in what we're learning here, and to really kind of do a deep dive into that. I think equitable and inclusive practices show up in our library and classroom materials, in the books, puzzles, toys, and posters that we have. We want all of these objects to reflect our students, back to the diversity piece, right? All of these items should reflect who we have in our building, and they should show students of varying ethnicities. Stories should include many religions, and they should reject gender bias and stereotypes, all kinds of stereotypes. We see equitable and inclusive practices show up in our teachers' classroom management techniques. I know people have different systems in place for calling on kids, so not the same students are being called on all the time. Also, when we're doing collaborative work, we rotate the roles so that not the same person has the same job every time. There's the same person's not always the reporter or the recorder, right? We rotate those things so everyone has a chance to try all things. I see equity and inclusion in our chapel services and our devotions where we honor and celebrate and observe the holidays of lots of religions, multiple religions, especially those that are represented in our school community, as well as in our devotions and in our classrooms. Families and parents are always welcome to come and share in these services and in these opportunities just so that we learn more and it's more inclusive. We also use uniforms at St. Anne's to kind of eliminate that desire for competition when it comes to clothing and brand names. We've eliminated some of that with our uniform policy. And in middle school, we have sports teams where all 6th through 8th graders participate and everyone has a chance to play on a team, which I know is not the case necessarily in all school environments. I've also really been very interested lately in equitable and inclusive practices in distance learning. So I've been reading a lot of articles. I've been having conversations with lots of other diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners from other independent and public schools. And so I really paused to think about what we were doing well from my perspective in this. And then maybe we can also talk about things that we still might consider doing. So in our curriculum, I know that our teachers have taken a lot of time to offer choice in assignments. So they might be presenting a particular concept, but students are allowed to come at it in different ways, right? So student A might be able to complete this assignment and student B might choose to complete a different assignment, but they're still learning the same concept. I really appreciate that the school has ensured that every student has a device with audio and video capabilities. I know a lot of schools, they are still struggling with this, where students do not have the tools that they need to complete assignments. And it really is creating an unfair environment and putting kids at a disadvantage. So I'm very grateful and very happy that the school has been able to do that. And if there's something that we need to do differently, I know that we would love to hear that. We have flexibility in our teaching sessions with synchronous and asynchronous lessons. So students are able to work at a pace that works for them. They're able to also connect with their teachers and their classmates when they're able, with the understanding that not everyone is always going to be able to sign on to those sessions, and that's okay. But the opportunities are there. So I'd like to pause. I'd love to hear from other teachers and leadership team members that are on the call, as well as parents, as to where we see equity and inclusion show up here at St. Anne's, both in the building and in our distance learning practices.
One of the things that I worry about with just with kids and just with our age group of kids, in particular middle school in general, is that while in the building, we've got kids that sometimes try to become invisible in the classroom and that type of thing. And so I wonder, with the distance learning, if little Barry Davis were there, I'd probably be a little bit uncomfortable being on screen. And so the first thing that I think about is, what are the ways that I would be able to hide to not be engaged? And so I'm curious from the parents and from the teachers, if you find challenges in that way with kids that are, just apprehensive about being on screen, and why, and what are the things that you do to address that?
Thank you, Barry. So Soumya has added in the chat that she's been very impressed with how St. Anne's has managed to make distance learning so accessible. After speaking with friends with children at other schools, she knows that this is not happening everywhere. So thank you for sharing that, Soumya. That has been something that we've been very mindful of as we've gone through this process. And as you all know, this journey has been a new path, and one we've not really walked before. So those are definitely questions that we've been asking ourselves. How can we meet the needs of all of our students and provide enough diversification in our teaching and in the availability, I guess, that we have, both as an administrative team and as a faculty to be there for our families. Something that I shared earlier at the middle school coffee is about how the kids feel about showing up and being their authentic selves. And Soumya added here that Keshav is very shy about being on screen, and he gets extremely self-conscious. She said, not sure how to deal with this and trying to work on it. And I think that's a big part of what we're talking about. So kids, when they get up in the morning and they have their breakfast and they get dressed and get in the car and come to school and they show up in the building, that looks very different for them when they're at home, when they're an N of 1 on a screen, or maybe they're in a space in their house that is now a lot more personal to share. An example that I gave this morning is that I'm always keenly aware of, being on camera and trying to pick a spot in my house that, maybe isn't piled with laundry or a mess from the chaos that, that we're going through right now, and trying to juggle kids being at home and working from home. And, I think that those are things, it's like when you have guests come over and you can kind of shove something in a closet, or at least that's what I do sometimes. There are spaces that have been private or have been a solitude that now are open, and friends can see, and classmates can see, and it really requires another level of vulnerability that not everyone's comfortable with. And as a result, that can definitely impact your engagement, and it can impact how you are showing up and being able and ready to learn. And so we want to be really mindful of that. Jennifer Kellner shares that with the preschoolers, the youngest learners, and Jennifer's one of our associate teachers in preschool, they recognize that it's uncomfortable for the students to be on camera and have made it clear that having the camera on helps them listen to the lessons, and students can come and go, so they don't have to always be, present. So I think as teachers too, something we're doing is noticing that expectations that we might have in the classroom, where if a student is in the classroom and they're sitting at their desk, they can't really hide their desk in the classroom, but when they're home, there might be other reasons for why they are sliding off to the side and maybe not being on camera at that moment. And we need to be understanding, and we need to be thinking about the why behind that, and not just making an assumption that they're fooling around or not attending. That we really need to look deeper at those things. And I think back to your example with Keshav, Soumya, I think talking to kids too, and trying to engage where their comfort level is, and also not necessarily forcing some of this. So we need to make accommodations so that kids do get what they need, so that they do feel like they can be in a space where they can engage and they can learn and they can feel safe. Amy, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, absolutely. And that just takes us to our next slide. So on my chats with other diversity, equity, and inclusion practitioners from other schools, we really are able to have open conversations about what they're hearing in their building. So while I personally haven't been able to get a lot of feedback from our families, I wonder if all of these things are happening in our community as well. So the first question right there is, do all of our students have a workspace with a background that they feel comfortable sharing with the class? And we just talked about that. Or what are the other reasons they might not feel comfortable being on screen? Also, kind of tied with number one, we were talking about bias, right? So what people are seeing and making maybe unconscious judgments about what they see in other people's homes, right? And all that goes with that. And students worrying about, well, I wonder what my teacher's going to think about me or my family because of what they see. And now they're distracted from what they're supposed to be doing, the task at hand, because they're so worried about other things. Or perhaps looking at their friends like, wow, their room looks really amazing. I wish they had that. Now, all of these distractions that are kind of taking away from the lessons. I've also heard a lot of other schools saying, or wondering if students have all the tools they need to complete all assignments. So we know that our students have devices to complete assignments, but are they really able to complete all assignments? Do they have what they need? Up until a month ago, my students at home, my own personal children, we did not have a printer at home. We just weren't using one so often anymore, and we didn't have one. But now all of a sudden, overnight, they needed one. So we were able to get a printer, but I wonder, does everyone have all of the tools that they need to complete all assignments? And if they don't, is that equitable, right? So are they only able to do the ones that are online, but they can't do maybe that extension activity that they want to do? So we need to consider that. We also need to consider and ask, is the workload manageable for students with many responsibilities? Okay, a lot of kids, you even hear on the news, a lot of kids are helping out with childcare or household chores because of their parents' work duties, or perhaps because a parent is sick, or it could be for any reason. And this could change from week to week as well. So what might be manageable one week for a student might be completely unmanageable the next week. And are we flexible with that? Are we able to meet the needs? And how would we even know that? Like, do our families feel comfortable sharing this personal information with us so that we can make accommodations? Have we created a safe space here at St. Anne's where people can share things? And I shared on the middle school talk, there was a person from another independent school who said that I can share this story, that they had a family who, because of this, the parents lost their jobs. And because they lost their jobs, very quickly, they are also not in their home. So they're living out of their car. And the student did not want anyone at their independent school to know that they were living out of their car. Yet they had to get onto these, video chats, right? So they were worrying about their background. People are going to be able to tell, how do they protect themselves and their privacy? So that's a challenge that other people are facing. We don't even know like what people in our community are facing. And we need to make sure that we have created a space where people feel comfortable helping. And then as a community, we can all come together and brainstorm and try to help solve issues that arise and problems. So I'm wondering what else is missing from the picture? Like, what are we missing from our equitable and inclusive practices when it comes to distance learning? And I'd like to pause and invite people to share maybe what they're experiencing or what they see or what they're wondering about.
I was trying to add a chat, which I know I've done in the past. This is Megan. But I certainly, hearing a story like that just breaks your heart. And I don't know if there's some anonymous way they could communicate with someone at St. Anne's, but I know if those are situations, I think ourselves and others in the community would certainly like to help out. I don't know if there's an avenue for people to it's not necessary for anyone to know something like that, but certainly if there were a vehicle that could make it known to others, I think many of us would like to help with that, because I think I'd like to see every child have an opportunity. I mean, I know everything won't always be equal. They should certainly have the tools that they need to do their education. And if as something someone had help with that, kind of like a sharing, I'd certainly be interested in participating in that.
Absolutely, that's really a good idea. And we actually do have a follow-up link here for people to submit comments or ask questions, and it can be anonymous, and that could be a vehicle that people could use to say what's going on. These answers are only shared with me, and then I could share as necessary with the leadership team, and we can help problem solve that way. Or maybe we can brainstorm another forum where people have where they can share stories anonymously or just very, very privately with a select person, perhaps Barry or whoever it may be in our community. But I think the goal definitely is having our entire community come together to solve these problems, because we have a wealth of resources among us.
I've dropped the link to that form in the chat box so that you can access it. It's a Google form. And I think, the challenge becomes, the family that Amy's speaking of is not anyone that we know necessarily, but we also don't know if there are folks in our community who are experiencing something similar and just don't feel safe or comfortable to share that. And so, we want to continue to try to strive to be a place where families do feel that they have a lifeline to reach out to, just like you're saying, Megan, so that, if families are in need, that we want them to know that that they can ask for help, that they can come to us. But there's a certain level of embarrassment and pride, and so trying to be mindful of this helps us create an awareness so that, again, we always want to be asking ourselves the why of if a family isn't showing up or if a student isn't showing up. There might be some reasons that we're not aware of, and we just need to be mindful of it, and hopefully continue to cultivate a community where they feel like the resources and the support are there to reach out so that we can help them through it.
So, and I just want to add one other thing, just in terms of challenges of online learning, distance learning. I think as a community, I think it takes our relationships to a very different place. So when we're in school every day, we have these relationships with our families, with our kids, faculty, and we kind of know where those relationships begin and where those relationships end. And I think once we get into this space where we're online, kind of brings us into each other's spaces, into each other's personal spaces. And I'm not saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm saying it does take us to a different place with regard to those relationships. And so we've been talking all year about how important it is that we know each other and all these things. But I also know that in all of the meetings that I'm in, there's this little bit of distance and there's this little bit of apprehension that I always feel, just because it's just that it's uncomfortable because it's something that is new. But I think it's worth thinking about. How do you feel when you get on these online chats, and why do you feel that way? I mean, I'm not saying those are questions that I'm looking for answers to, but it is something that I think about. I mean, I had to get my hair all did just to get ready for this. It was a long morning. No, in all seriousness, it does require some serious thought before you jump onto it, and I can only imagine for a child that's got to produce a little bit of angst. So.
Absolutely. I've heard that as well. People very concerned about their appearance, their hair, young children having their hair done in time for their first meet and things like that. So I'm wondering if there's anything else perhaps that we should be considering and thinking about.
Amy, can I just add that, I think that your question is a good one, and one that most of us will continue to really think about and ponder. And so there might not be something that's coming to your mind right now, but there might be something that rises up at a later point. And whether you want to use the link that we shared to share that with Amy, or you want to reach out to one of us individually, I would encourage you to just kind of keep this in the forefront of your mind, because these things, sometimes they don't come to you until there's something else that you experience or that you see. And then, and so it's an ongoing conversation. And we are open and curious and wanting you to share this with us, because it's what's going to help us be able to provide for our kids moving forward.
Yes, thanks, Val. Did someone else want to share? Okay. So we talked about diversity, about who's in the building, and we talked about equity in our practices, both here and in distance learning. And then finally, we're going to wrap it up talking a little bit about inclusion. And inclusion is just like the final goal, right? It's where everyone is thriving and feeling safe and participating. So St. Anne's is a place where students are known, loved, challenged, and inspired for their future. We live this, we share this every day, we say it, and we really believe it. And that in itself is inclusion. Okay, our students are armed with a growth mindset, and they are prepared to thrive. They're not afraid to take risks. They know that they are safe, and they are able to participate fully and be who they truly are. And that's all that it means for inclusion. And that's our ultimate goal. The last thing I want to share is that there are some upcoming parent workshops from an organization called Pollyanna. And I actually first learned about Pollyanna at the People of Color Conference, which is sponsored by the National Association of Independent Schools. And I'm really looking at their work to help us with our cultural competency in our curriculum, and maybe having a DEI curriculum even more woven into like all of our academic areas. But they are offering these parenting workshops, and it's called Parenting During a Pandemic. It's a parent group that meets on Wednesdays from 11 to 12. The first one was this past Wednesday where they were having a time of self-reflection. But as you can see, every Wednesday for the next 5 Wednesdays, they are going to be having these workshops. So I really encourage you, everyone is welcome and invited to participate. I hope that maybe if you have an opportunity, you can sign on. And I'd also love to hear what you learned from these or what you think might be a good fit for our school during this time. And I'd like to see if there are any other questions or comments, because that wraps up the slideshow portion. But I'd really like to keep the conversation going if people have things they'd like to discuss.
And I'll just add that in the chat box, I put the link to the Pollyanna workshops. And again, they occur every Wednesday from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time from May 13th to June 10th.
Good morning. This is
Good morning.
Sophia.
Hi.
Nice to hear your
Hi.
voice.
Amy, good morning. And first of all, I just want to thank you for everything that you've done in terms of, with everything that you're doing with the diversity, equity, inclusion. Over the past 2 years, I know we've had many discussions and, done a lot to work forward with this initiative. And I think that St. Anne's has, and I've told you this before, has done a wonderful job with issues, that children might face in terms of maybe their differences and how to handle them in the schools. And I tell you, other schools don't have these things. And I'm very grateful for that. I know that Culture Day was like a really fun, event, and that's something I know that we are really missing. So I like the fact that we're doing the Culture Day activity.
Oh, good.
So it's a nice way to kind of still allow us to participate, even though we can't be at the school. I also wanted to say I love the flags in the front. They look so nice.
Yeah, they did.
And I think it's just a great way to, you walk in and you just kind of see how diverse the school is. So I think there's a lot of effort being, I appreciate all the effort that everyone has been putting in for this. And so those are some of the things that, I notice and I see, and that I just want to say thank you so much for all that.
Thank you so much for that feedback and for your support. I'm really super excited about the direction that we're headed in. And I was very disappointed. I was thinking about it all day Wednesday, like, well, we would have been doing this right now, or we would have been doing that right now. But we will have Culture Day on campus again. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I can't wait to see people send back their cards illustrating their families and to hang it up. I think it'll be a very beautiful representation of our community and everyone that we have here at St. Anne's. So thank you so much for your kind words and for your support.
Yeah, no, I think it'll be a great thing to see once they're all in. So we're working on it.
Yeah.
Hopefully we can get it done soon. Yeah. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thanks.
What happened? You're muted.
Sorry, guys probably couldn't hear that. Thank you again, Sylvia. What I was saying is that if you did not receive your Culture Day packet on field day at the field day t-shirt distribution, or if you didn't get it when you picked up your shirt, please reach out to Amy and she'll be happy to make arrangements to get that to you. But we're really looking forward to the project and putting together our St. Anne's Culture Quilt. Okay, if we're happy to stay on if anyone has any additional questions. It's a chilly but beautiful sunshiny day out there. I know several of you are probably headed over to campus to celebrate the teachers today. We're going to be there and we're looking forward to that at 12:30. And want to thank all of you for all of the wonderful, thoughtful things that you've been doing for the teachers this week. Tammy, is there any announcement or anything you want to make while we're on here?
Nothing in particular. I was just going to say the same thing, that we hope to see everyone out there this afternoon at 12:30. It is going to be a great time. It is a little windy, but not as windy as they were predicting, so that's exciting. So I just look forward to seeing.
We look forward to seeing everyone too. And we want to thank you again for taking time on your Saturday mornings to be with us. Like I said, this is the last official coffee for the school year, but not our last coffee. This has been a really beneficial opportunity for us to connect as a community, and we're looking at more ways that we can do this in the future. And Amy, I want to thank you especially for your leadership and for taking the time to be with us and talk with us this morning.
No, thank you. I love it. And I look forward to continuing the conversations with everyone. So thank you so much for the opportunity.
All right, everyone, be well and stay safe.
Yep, thank you.
Bye-bye.